The waitress spilled wine on the Mafia boss's lap. He smiled and said, "Now you owe me." The rain at Arclight Pier did not just fall, it attacked. It hammered the cobblestones and threw itself against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Red Ember Lounge, blurring the Baltimore Harbor lights into a smear of neon watercolor. Inside, it was a different world, warm, loud, and thick with the smell of old money and new ambition. The air was saturated with expensive perfume and the low, confident hum of men discussing million-dollar deals and political maneuvers. My name is Lena Marlowe. I am 23 years old, and my feet felt like they were staging a rebellion. I had just run 6 blocks from my last class at the community college. My journalism textbook, a lead weight in my backpack, which was currently stuffed into a locker that smelled like stale bread and anxiety. This was job number 2 of 3. The morning shift was at a diner slinging hash browns. The night shift was here, serving liquid gold to the city's financial sharks and political predators. The third job, squeezed in between, was transcribing audio files for a legal firm, which paid peanuts but let me sit down. Exhaustion was a constant. Dull ache behind my eyes. I gripped the silver tray, the crystal glasses reflecting the low amber light. Table 7 needed their check. Table 4 wanted another bottle of the 1995 Bordeaux, and I just needed to make it to midnight. Then it happened. I was navigating the tight space between the mahogany-paneled wall and the most important table in the restaurant, the one reserved for Silas Caravello. A stocky man from the finance table suddenly pushed his chair back, laughing boisterously at his own joke. I pivoted, a waitress's instinct, but my hip caught the edge of his chair. The tray tilted. Time slowed down. I watched, horrified, as the glass of Chateau Margaux, $300 a bottle, almost a week's rent for me, tipped. It was a perfect, terrible arc of deep crimson. It landed directly in the lap of the quietest man in the room. The music seemed to dip, the laughter cut off. Every eye swiveled to our table. Silas Caravello did not move. He was known as the silent operator of the Valorum Circle, the shadow organization that owned the port logistics. He was not a flashy gangster. He was the man the flashy gangsters reported to. He wore an impeccably tailored suit, charcoal gray, now stained a deep, spreading purple. My entire body went cold. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, my voice sounding thin and useless. I fumbled for a napkin, my hands shaking. He looked at the stain, then up at me. His eyes were a calm, unreadable shade of olive. I braced for the explosion, the quiet word to my manager that would have me blacklisted from every decent restaurant in the city. Instead, the corners of his mouth lifted in a slow, almost imperceptible smile. He took the napkin from my trembling hand, his fingers brushing mine. The contact was brief, but it sent a jolt up my arm, a strange warmth against my icy fear. "It is all right," he said. His voice was low, a smooth baritone that cut through the silence effortlessly. He dabbed at his trousers, a useless gesture. "But now you owe me." I stared, baffled. "Sir." Before I could process the strangest reaction I had ever seen, a voice boomed from the table beside us. "Damn, Caravello. If I knew that was all it took to get a pretty little thing in your lap, I would have ordered the same wine." It was Councilman Davies, his face flushed with alcohol and entitlement. His table erupted in crude laughter. I felt my face burn, a familiar, helpless shame creeping up my neck. I was just the help, the target. I did not have to say anything. Silas Caravello did not even turn his head toward the councilman. He simply lifted his own pristine linen napkin from the table, unfolded it, and placed it over the stain on his lap. "Careful, Councilman," Silas said, his voice still quiet, yet it carried across the room. "Some stains are impossible to get out, especially the ones that come from opening your mouth at the wrong time." The councilman's laughter died instantly, choked in his throat. The entire table went silent. The political operator looked like a schoolboy who had just been reprimanded by the principal. Silas held his gaze for 1, 2, 3 seconds, and turned his calm eyes back to me. The dismissal was absolute. That was when my manager, Greg, stormed over. "Marlowe, what in God's name did you do?" His face was puce, his voice a sharp, panicked screech. "This is a $2,000 suit, a $300 bottle of wine." "It was my fault, Greg," I started. I do not care you are clumsy. You are... She is fine. Greg... Silas's voice cut through my manager's tirade like a chilled steel blade. Greg froze, his mouth half open. "Mr. Caravello, I am so sorry. Her shift is continuing." Silas stated it was not a request. "And we will have another bottle of the Margot." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a black leather money clip, and peeled off several bills. I did not see the denomination, but when he tucked it into Greg's breast pocket, my manager's eyes widened. "This is for the new bottle, and for the trouble, and for her." Greg looked from the money to Silas, then to me, his expression a mixture of confusion and sudden, fawning respect. The power dynamic in the room had not just shifted, it had been entirely rewritten. Every diner in the Red Ember, the financial titans and the political hopefuls, watched Silas Caravello defend a 23-year-old waitress. It was not a show of force, it was a show of style. As I retreated to the kitchen to get the new bottle, my heart hammering against my ribs, I caught a glimpse of a man at a small table near the bar. He was wiry, with restless eyes that did not belong in a place this refined. I recognized him Rex, a low-level enforcer for the Harbor Line Pact, the Valorum Circle's only real rival. He was holding his phone up, discreetly recording the entire exchange. He caught my eye, gave a thin, reptilian smile, and his thumb tapped the screen, sending. I spent the next hour hiding in the staff hallway, my back pressed against the cool plaster. My phone was almost dead, but I had just enough power to pay the electricity bill I had gotten the shut-off notice for, $36.14. I watched the confirmation screen appear, the red, overdue text turning green. My shoulders sagged in relief. Right below it was the tuition notification from the college, $750, due in 2 days. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes. I knew waitresses here who made that in one night. They did not just serve wine. They listened. They remembered details, who was sleeping with whom, which politician was taking private meetings with which lobbyist. They sold those details to the highest bidder. I had always told myself I was better than that. I was a journalist. But journalism was not paying the bills. When I returned to the floor, I could feel Silas's eyes on me. I did not look at his table, but I was aware of him. I was aware of my own body. The way my hands were still not perfectly steady as I poured water for the councilman's now silent table. I felt scanned, analyzed. Silas knew. He knew I was not just clumsy. He knew I was running on fumes, stretched thin to the point of breaking, and he had filed that information away. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of forced smiles and quiet efficiency. By 2 a.m., the lounge was empty. The rain had softened to a persistent drizzle. I clocked out, grabbed my backpack, and pulled my thin jacket tight. The walk home to Prospect Key was always unnerving this late, the streets slick and empty, the fog rolling in thick from the water. Tonight, it felt different. I was 3 blocks from my apartment when I heard it. Not just footsteps, but the low, wet crunch of tires on asphalt moving too slowly. A black SUV, its windows tinted so dark they looked like polished obsidian, was crawling along the curb about 20 feet behind me. My breath hitched. I walked faster, my keys already in my hand, one key pushed out between my knuckles. The SUV sped up, matching my pace. There was nowhere to run. The street was lined with dark warehouses. Just as a genuine, cold panic began to seize my throat, another car turned the corner, a sleek, dark sedan, the kind that whispers money instead of shouting it. It glided past me and then, incredibly, stopped, angling itself to block the SUV's path. The back window of the sedan lowered. I could not see clearly, but I saw the silhouette of a man. Silas Caravello. He did not get out. He did not speak. He just looked at the SUV, the driver of the SUV, hidden behind the dark glass. Must have seen him, must have recognized the authority. For a long moment, nobody moved. It was a silent, high-stakes conversation held in the language of engines and implied threat. Then, slowly, the SUV's reverse lights flashed on. It backed up, executed a tight, clumsy three-point turn, and sped off into the night. The sedan's window slid up. The car pulled away smoothly, disappearing around the next corner without a sound. I stood there, shaking, the cold rain seeping into my sneakers. My apartment was small, the linoleum on the kitchen floor peeling up at the corners. I dropped my keys on the counter, my backpack sliding to the floor with a heavy thud, and I saw it. Resting on my worn-out copy of The Elements of Style was a business card, thick, cream-colored cardstock. It was embossed with a single stylized C and a 10-digit phone number. Nothing else. I had no memory of taking it. He must have slipped it into my apron pocket when he handed me the napkin. I must have pulled it out with my keys. I turned it over. On the back, in bold, confident ink from a fountain pen, was a short, handwritten message. When you need to, call. The morning light was gray and unforgiving, matching the taste in my mouth. Silas Caravello's business card was still on my kitchen counter, a stark white square against the peeling laminate. I stared at the name, the single embossed C, and the number. When you need to, call. I slid it into the pocket of my jeans. I paid my own bills. I did not make calls like that. I stepped out of my apartment and nearly tripped over the envelope shoved under my door. It was not a bill. It was a notice. My rent was increasing by 20% effective the first of the month. I stormed down the hallway to my landlord's unit, catching him as he was locking his door. "Mr. Henderson, you cannot do this," I said, holding up the notice. "My lease isn't up for 4 more months." Henderson was a soft man who always smelled faintly of stale beer. He adjusted his glasses, refusing to meet my eyes. "Read the addendum, Miss Marlowe. The Interstate Integrity Commission just passed a new regulation." He tapped the paper. "A mandatory neighborhood security fee. It is completely out of my hands. My costs go up. Your costs go up." "Security," I scoffed, looking at the flickering fluorescent light above us and the graffiti on the stairwell. "What security?" "It is the IIC, Miss. It is the law." He shrugged, a greasy, final gesture, and walked away. The new rent figure swam in my vision. It was not just an increase, it was an eviction notice in polite print. I was late for my journalism seminar, my mind spinning. My final investigative project was due in 2 weeks. I was digging into systematic tip theft at high-end restaurants, a story I knew intimately. I had spreadsheets, anonymous testimony from 3 other waitresses, and pay stub discrepancies. It was solid. When I got to the small, crowded newsroom at the college, I saw Todd, an ambitious intern, sitting at my workstation. My stomach dropped. "Hey, Lena," he said, smiling too quickly. "Just checking out your data. This is impressive stuff." He was trying to airdrop the entire project folder to his own phone. "Get away from my computer, Todd." "You were just stealing my byline." I shoved him aside and hit the cancel prompt. "It is encrypted, anyway, and the drive is partitioned. You would have gotten a corrupted file." He turned red, stammered something about a misunderstanding, and vanished. I leaned against the desk, my heart pounding. I was surrounded by sharks, and not just at the restaurant. I immediately re-encrypted the files with a new password and backed them up to a thumb drive I kept hidden in my shoe. That evening, I found my neighbor's daughter, Maria, sitting on the front steps of our building. She was maybe 10 years old, and she was crying quietly. Tied to the iron railing with a piece of speaker wire was a dog, a pit bull, brindle-coated and far too thin, his ribs showing like a washboard. He had a deep gash over one eye, but he sat with a quiet dignity, watching the traffic. "The people in 4C moved out," Maria sniffled. "They just left him here." I knelt. The dog watched me, his body tense, expecting a blow. "Hey, I said softly. I held out my hand, palm down. It is okay. He flinched, then hesitantly leaned forward and sniffed my fingers. His tail gave one tentative thump against the concrete. His eyes were not mean, they were just tired. I cannot keep him, Maria wept. My mom said no. I know. I looked at the dog, at the resilience in his scarred face. I saw a reflection of myself, of everyone in this neighborhood, just trying to hold on. I will take him, I heard myself say. Just for tonight, we will figure it out. I carried him upstairs. He weighed almost nothing. The red ember was buzzing when I arrived for my shift. Greg, my manager, grabbed my arm before I could even clock in. His face was pale and sweaty. Marlo, you are not in the main room tonight. You are on table 32. Table 32, I repeated, confused. That is the alcove, by the kitchen doors. We never seat that table unless it is an overflow. It is seated tonight. His eyes darted around nervously. Just keep them happy. Do not cause any trouble. I knew immediately this was wrong. This was a setup. Last night's recording, Rex. This was the payback. Table 32 was occupied by 4 men. They were not the Red Ember's usual clientele. They wore cheap suits, their voices were too loud, and they smelled like stale cigars and intimidation. They were Harbor Line pack soldiers, Rex's crew. They were here to teach me a lesson. For an hour, I endured it. They called me sweetheart and baby. They intentionally dropped silverware just to watch me bend over. They ordered the cheapest beer and demanded the most expensive service. I kept my face blank, my voice professional, just trying to survive the shift. Then the main door opened. The hum of the restaurant quieted. Silas Caravello entered, followed by 3 men in sharp, severe suits. He looked like a panther walking into a room full of house cats. Greg rushed to greet him, but Silas's eyes were already moving. Scanning the room, he saw me, isolated in the back alcove. He saw the men I was serving. He saw the tension in my shoulders and the way the other servers pointedly avoided looking in my direction. He recognized the scent of trouble. He did not react, just nodded to Greg and followed him to his prime booth, disappearing from my line of sight. My heart sank. Of course he would not intervene. Last night was a fluke, a rich man's whim. The leader at my table, a man with a tattoo of a spider web on his neck, decided he was done waiting. As I refilled his water glass, he grabbed my wrist. His grip was vice-like. "Hey, you're ignoring us, duh," he sneered. "Sir, please let go," I said, my voice trembling, despite my best efforts. "I think I will keep you," he said, and yanked my arm hard, pulling me off balance. "I believe the lady asked you to let go." Silas Caravello was standing right behind the man. He had moved without a sound. The man holding me laughed, but it was a nervous sound. "Mind your own business, buddy." Silas did not draw a weapon. He did not raise his voice. He simply used the one weapon no one in that alcove was expecting: impeccable manners. He leaned forward, picked up the man's unused linen napkin, and flicked it open with a snap of his wrist. "You seem to be having a difficult evening," Silas said smoothly, his voice pure ice. He pulled the man's chair out from the table slightly, a gesture that was both polite and deeply threatening. "Perhaps you are overtired." He then looked past the man, toward the manager's station. "Greg." His voice was not loud, but it cut through the entire restaurant. Greg scrambled over, his face ashen. "Greg," Silas said, placing the napkin gently on the table, "my apologies for my guest. He was just leaving." He looked at the man holding me. He was also apologizing to the staff for his lack of training and basic courtesy. The man's face went from smug to terrified. He recognized who Silas was. The grip on my wrist vanished. "You were just leaving," Silas repeated. The man and his crew practically fell over each other trying to get out, throwing cash on the table as they fled. As they burst through the kitchen exit, I saw them confronted in the alley. 2 more of Rex's men were waiting, but blocking their path was the tall, silent man who had been with Silas last night, Gianni. He did not move. He just stood there, an immovable object. The standoff ended with Rex's men backing down, disappearing into the dark. Gianni merely adjusted his cuff, a shadow watching the shadows. I was leaning against the wall, breathing hard, trying to stop my hands from shaking. A small smear of grease from the man's hand was on my apron. Silas walked over to me. He did not touch me. He simply reached into his jacket and pulled out a clean, pressed handkerchief. It was dark gray linen, with a single silver C embroidered in the corner. He held it out. I took it, my fingers brushing his. The fabric was soft and cool. "That is twice, sir," I whispered. "I believe," he said, his voice low, "that I owed you a peaceful shift. I regret that it was not." He looked at the handkerchief, then back at my face. "But I am still keeping that you owe me in reserve." "I do not understand," I said. "You keep protecting me. Why?" "Because you owe me is not a debt, Lena," he said, using my name for the first time. "It is my claim. It is my right to protect you." Before I could answer, he turned and walked back to his table, leaving me holding the silver-threaded C. I got home late, my feet aching, my mind a war zone. The pit bull, who I'd started calling Anchor, was asleep on my bath mat. I made myself a cup of tea, my hands still unsteady. My phone buzzed on the counter, a text from a blocked number. "Nice work on the tip story. Too bad no one will read it. The MTCA is launching a full compliance audit of your apartment. Expect visitors. Shut it down." MTCA, the Metropolitan Trade Compliance Authority, the same organization Rex had sent the video to, the same web of acronyms as the IIC. This was not a warning. It was a declaration of war. I looked at the threatening text. I looked at Anchor, sleeping peacefully. I looked at the eviction notice on my fridge. My fingers found the thick cardstock in my pocket. When you need to, call. I picked up the phone. I knew this call would change everything. I knew it was a line I could never uncross. I dialed the number. The call I made to Silas was brief, my voice flat, betraying none of the panic clawing at my throat. I recited my address, a string of numbers I had repeated 1,000 times. He said only 2 words back, his voice calm and dark through the speaker. "Be ready." He did not explain what for. The knock came at 8 o'clock the next morning. It was not a polite inquiry. It was a hard, flat-palmed pounding that vibrated the cheap wood of my door. Anchor, the pit bull I had rescued, lifted his head from the bath mat, a low growl forming deep in his chest. I peered through the peephole. 2 men in dark, ill-fitting suits stood in the hallway. They looked official, but their impatience felt wrong. I opened the door, leaving the security chain engaged. "Lena Marlowe," the taller of the 2 spoke. His voice clipped. He flashed a badge so quickly it was just a glint of gold. "Metropolitan Trade Compliance Authority. We have a report of unregulated financial activity at this residence. Open the door." The MTCA, the text message had been real. My hand was shaking as I fumbled with the chain. I opened the door. They did not wait for an invitation. They pushed past me, filling my tiny apartment with their hostile energy. "I do not understand," I said, my voice thin. "What activity?" "We are conducting a surprise compliance audit," the shorter one said. His eyes roamed my living room, lingering on my laptop, my pile of textbooks. "We show flags for a series of strange transfers. Undeclared income." Undeclared income, I almost laughed. I'm a waitress and a community college student. My only income is declared on a W-2, and it is barely enough to keep the lights on, which, by the way, I just paid. Miles away, in a secure office overlooking the gray expanse of the harbor, Silas Caravello watched the same scene play out on a large monitor. The feed was crisp, tapped from a high-definition community camera his Valorum Circle had donated to the Prospect Key Neighborhood Association. Gianni stood motionless behind his chair. Silas leaned forward. His eyes narrowed and rewound the footage of the man flashing the badge. He paused the frame, zooming in on the golden seal. "Gianni," he said, his voice a low murmur. "Sir." The font, Silas pointed at the screen. MTCA updated their official insignia in 2020. That badge is using the old 2019 typeface. He zoomed in closer. It is a high-quality forgery, but it is a forgery. Back in my apartment, the fear began to recede, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. My journalism ethics professor, Alistair, had drilled this into us. If you are in a public space, or if they are officials operating in your home, you have the right to record. Make it known. Create a record. I picked up my phone from the counter. I opened the audio recording app, hit the red button, and placed the phone's screen up on the kitchen table, directly between us. For my own records, I announced, my voice surprisingly steady. I am now recording this interaction. May I please have both of your names and your badge numbers? The two men looked at each other, their bravado flickering. And, I continued, pressing the advantage, may I please see the specific legal basis for this audit? The warrant I have received no written notification of any compliance issue. This is a priority investigation, miss. The taller one snapped, recovering. We do not need a warrant to... Actually, you do, I interrupted, my tone still meticulously polite. Under State Code 3-11, you absolutely need a warrant for a non-consensual search of a private residence or probable cause of an imminent crime. You have presented neither. So, I must ask you again to provide your credentials and the warrant, or to please leave my home. The shorter one scoffed, his face turning red. You think you are smart? Huh, college girl. He took a threatening step toward my desk and my closed laptop. Maybe we should just take a look at these strange transfers ourselves. He reached for my backpack. A sound, deeper than a growl, tore through the small room. Anchor had moved from the kitchen. He stood between me and the agents, his body planted, his scarred head lowered. He did not bark. He did not snap. He just vibrated with contained menace. His eyes locked on the man's outstretched hand. Call off your dog, the agent said, snatching his hand back. He is not doing anything, I said truthfully. He's just standing there. He does not like people reaching for my things. At that exact moment, a flash of light came from the apartment building across the alleyway. I glanced over. My neighbor, Maria's mother, was standing in her window, holding her phone up. She was filming them. The taller agent saw her. He swore, a vicious, quiet sound. He looked at me, at the dog, at the phone on the table, and at the camera in the window. He was trapped. This is not over, Marlowe, he said, jabbing a finger at me. You want to play lawyer fine? We will be back. And next time, we will have a warrant. We will tear this place apart, down to the studs. They turned and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to make the walls shake. I locked the deadbolt and sank to the floor, my legs giving out. Anchor immediately broke his stance, came over, and pushed his heavy head into my lap, whining softly. My phone buzzed on the table. It was not a text. It was an email from a fully encrypted address I did not recognize. The subject line was empty. Inside, there was a single attachment MTCA _internal_guide_2023.pdf. My fingers trembled as I opened it. It was a 112-page internal manual, the kind of document that was not supposed to exist outside the agency. It detailed everything from interdepartmental email codes to uniform regulations. And there, on page 14, was a high-resolution comparative graphic, obsolete insignia pre-2020, next to current standard insignia post-2020. The font was different. Silas had not sent men. He had not made a call. He had sent me a tool. He was confirming my suspicion and giving me the evidence to prove it. I took a deep breath. I did not call him back to thank him or to ask what to do next. I knew what to do. I saved the audio file from my phone. I attached the threatening text message I had received. I attached a screenshot of my landlord's illegal IIC security fee notice. I wrote a one-page summary. Then, I sent the entire package to Professor Alistair. my investigative reporting mentor at the college, with a subject line, story pitch, urgent follow-up, weaponized bureaucracy and prospect key. I was not just a waitress anymore. I was building my case. The retaliation came 2 days later, and it was not from a fake government agency. It was from the gutter. I was at my morning diner shift when my phone started vibrating incessantly with social media notifications. A friend had tagged me. A local gossip blog, The Harbor Whisper, had a new lead story. The headline was blazed across the top, "Which red ember waitress is spilling more than wine to climb the ladder?" I clicked the link, my stomach turning to ice. There it was. The video Rex had taken. It was grainy, shot from the bar, perfectly capturing the moment I stumbled and dumped the $300 wine into Silas Caravello's lap. The clip was maliciously edited. It cut off right after he smiled. It showed nothing of Councilman Davies's harassment. It showed nothing of Silas defending me. It showed nothing of him saving my job. The accompanying article was pure venom, painting me as a conniving gold digger who had staged the accident to get the attention of the Valorum boss. It called me a port-side mistress and hinted I was sleeping my way into a world of organized crime. My landlord, Henderson, was waiting for me when I got home, his face a mask of false piety. "This is a disgrace. Miss Marlowe," he said, holding up his own phone, displaying the article. "I'm running a decent building. We have families here. I cannot have this kind of element. That is libel. Mr. Henderson, it is a complete lie. It is a violation of the morals clause in your lease," he said, his eyes gleaming. "I want you out by the 1st, unless, of course, you can pay the new security fee plus a reputational risk deposit, let's say, another $500. It was blatant extortion. I was being squeezed from all sides. That night, a text came through. It was from the number on the business card, just an address and a time. "Marrow and Brass, 8 o'clock. Tell the doorman you are there for Mr. C." I knew the name. It was not a restaurant. It was a high-end speakeasy, famously exclusive, hidden behind an artisan butcher shop in the old district. I spent an hour deciding what to wear, finally settling on my only clean black turtleneck, dark jeans, and my boots. I was not going to look like a victim. I fully charged my phone and, as an afterthought, grabbed the external battery pack from my journalism backpack and shoved it in my pocket. A reporter always has backup power. The butcher shop was dark, but a single, unmarked steel door in the adjoining alley was manned by a man who looked less like a bouncer and more like a defensive lineman. "I am here for Mr. C," I said. He did not speak. He just looked me over once, nodded, and opened the door. The contrast was immediate. The alley was cold and smelled of damp brick. Inside was warm, dark, and smelled of old leather and expensive whiskey. The walls were lined with books, the booths high-backed for privacy. The sound was dampened. It felt like a sanctuary. Silas was in the furthest booth, alone. A single glass of water sat in front of him. I slid into the seat opposite him. He watched me as I placed my phone and the battery pack on the table between us. "You came prepared," he observed, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "I am a journalist. I like to have my tools ready." "You did not call me," he stated. "Not about the blog, not about your landlord." "You sent me the PDF," I countered. "I assumed that was a cue. I did what a journalist does. I gathered my evidence, including the audio of the fake agents, and I sent it to my faculty advisor. We are building a file on Harborline's extortion tactics." A slow smile spread across his face, the same one I remembered from the restaurant. This time, it reached his eyes. "They are not MTCA. They are not IIC. They are just Rex, running a protection racket under a false flag, using your neighborhood as his testing ground. And you, Lena, just handed your professor a loaded weapon." "He knows how to use it," I said, my voice hardening. "Why am I here, Mr. Caravello? You said I owed you. Is it time to pay?" Silas leaned forward, the low candlelight carving shadows under his cheekbones. "I am offering you a position," he said. "Rex is sloppy. He's trying to get to me by hurting you. He thinks you are my weakness. He does not realize he just gave me my greatest asset." "I am not your asset," I said, my voice sharp, "and I am not for hire." "I know." His gaze was steady, unwavering. "I am not offering you a job. I am offering you a deal. I will provide protection. Real protection. The fake MTCA will vanish. Your landlord will suddenly remember his legal obligations. The Harbor Line crew will not come near you again." "In exchange for what?" I asked, my heart pounding a heavy, steady beat against my ribs. He looked at me, his gaze intense, analytical, and for the first time, I saw a flash of vulnerability. "In exchange, you become my witness. You keep doing exactly what you are doing. You use your eyes, your ears, and your audio recorder. You see the things I cannot see. You hear the whispers in the street, and you report them directly to me." He paused, letting the words hang in the silent, amber-lit air. "You will not be my subordinate. You will not be my employee." He held my gaze. "You will be my ally." The speakeasy's warmth felt like a trap, all leather and low light. I looked at Silas Caravello, at the man who commanded the city's arteries with a whisper, and he was offering me a deal that sounded suspiciously like a choice, an ally, not a subordinate. I picked up my phone from the table. "An ally," I repeated, the word tasting strange. "Allies have terms." He inclined his head. "They do." "I have 3 conditions," I said, my voice gaining strength. 1, you never ask me or force me to do anything illegal. My name, my integrity, is all I have. I will not compromise it." "Agreed," he said without hesitation. 2, my friends and my family, what little I have are off limits. You do not watch them. You do not follow them. You do not protect them. They are not part of this. Their privacy will be respected. And 3, I took a breath, holding his gaze. This alliance. If I ever say it is over, if I say stop, you stop. You walk away. No questions, no leverage, no but you owe me. The silence in the booth stretched. He was being framed, boxed in by his own offer. I was asking the most powerful man I had ever met to give me all the power. Silas leaned back, studying my face, not as a target, but as an equal. "You are building your own cage for me, Lena." "I am building a door," I corrected him, "one I can walk out of." He nodded. A slow, deliberate motion. 3 conditions. Accepted. He put his hand on the table, palm up, a gesture of contract. I looked at his hand, then at his face. I did not take his hand. I just nodded. "Then we have a deal." The next week, my life changed in small, seismic ways. My landlord, Henderson, met me in the hall, his face pale and his hands shaking. He apologized for the misunderstanding about the morals clause and the security fee. The fee, he explained, was a mistake. My original lease would be honored in full. The fake MTCA agents vanished. The men who used to loiter at the end of my street were gone. But protection was only half the deal. Silas called me 3 days later. "Meet me at the Rookfield County Gym," he said, 7 o'clock. It was not a gym. It was a massive, converted warehouse in the industrial district, bearing the Valorum Circle's VC logo discreetly on the door. Inside, it smelled of sweat, leather, and old iron. It was a serious place. Silas was waiting for me by a boxing ring, and he was not in a suit. He wore gray sweatpants and a simple black t-shirt that clung to his shoulders, revealing the coiled strength he usually kept hidden beneath tailored wool. He looked younger and infinitely more dangerous. "You are a target now," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "An ally has to know how to survive." He tossed me a pair of hand wraps. "I'm not going to teach you how to fight. I'm going to teach you how to stand your ground, how to break a grip." For an hour, he was a patient, demanding instructor. He showed me how to plant my feet, how to find my center of gravity. He grabbed my wrist, his grip firm but not painful, and showed me the leverage point, the specific twist against the thumb that would break any hold. "Again," he commanded. I did it. "Again, faster. Do not think, react." Then he moved to the heavy bag. "You have a lot of anger. Lena, I saw it at the restaurant. I saw it when you talked about your landlord, but you hold it all in your throat. Put it here." Done, he tapped the bag. "Aim for the center. Breathe out when you hit." I felt awkward, clumsy. My first punch was a pathetic tap. "You're swinging your arm," he said. "The power comes from your feet, from the ground. Twist your hip. Commit to it." I tried again, thinking of Rex, of Henderson, of the gossip blog, of my $700 tuition bill. I put all of it into my fist, twisted my body, and connected. The bag gave a satisfying thwack and swung heavily on its chain. A genuine laugh escaped me, short and surprised. "I did that?" "You did." And he was smiling too, a real smile that lit his olive eyes. "Now do it." "No." I swung again, fueled by the small victory, but I over-rotated, my balance completely gone. I pitched forward, right off my feet. In a move so fast, I barely registered it. Silas closed the distance. He did not just catch me, he stabilized me. His entire arm wrapped around my waist, his other hand gripping my shoulder, pulling me flush against his chest. The gym, the world, went silent. All I could feel was the solid wall of his body, the heat rolling off him. I could feel the hammering of his heart, or maybe it was mine. My hands were braced against his chest, the fabric of his shirt soft under my palms. I looked up. His face was inches from mine. His smile was gone, replaced by something more intense, something raw. His gaze dropped from my eyes to my mouth. The air between us was electric, a live wire. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to close the small distance. I saw his jaw tighten, his grip on my waist unconsciously flexing. The moment stretched, suspended, holding more attention than any fight. It was a question hanging in the air. He broke it. He consciously loosened his hold, took a deliberate, measured step back, and released me. The cold air of the gym rushed back into the space between us. He turned to the other side of the ring, his back to me for a moment. When he turned around, his expression was composed. 2-minute break, he said, his voice slightly rough, but loud, projecting to the empty warehouse. It was a signal, not just for me, but for himself. He was honoring my third condition. If I say stop, you stop. He was stopping before I even had to ask. He was respecting a boundary I had not even drawn yet. My respect for him in that moment eclipsed my fear and, terrifyingly, my attraction. I went home and threw myself into my work. I was not just a waitress, I was an ally. I took the scraps of information Silas sent me shipping manifests, incorporation names, and I used my journalism skills. I spent hours in the public records databases. I connected the dots. The Harbor Line Pact was using a string of shell companies. They were importing defective solar panels from overseas, declaring them as worthless scrap, and then reselling them at full price through a different company, washing millions of dollars. They are moving a shipment Friday. Silas told me over a secure line, Pier 5, midnight. "I will be there," I said. "You will not," he countered. "You will be on the O'Donnell Street overpass. Gianni will be with you. You will use this." He sent me a camera with a telephoto lens that looked like it belonged to a spy agency. "You are my witness. Lena, not my soldier. Get the truth on camera. Let the truth do the work." That night, I was lying flat on the concrete of the windy overpass, the metal vibrating as trucks rumbled beneath me. Gianni was a silent statue 20 feet away. Below me, the container yard was a stage lit by harsh orange sodium lights. I saw Rex. He was not wearing a cheap suit. He was in dockyard gear. He met with a man in a dark car. I zoomed in. The man handed Rex a thick manila envelope. I focused the lens. The man turned his head, and my stomach clenched. It was one of the fake MTCA agents, the one who had threatened me in my apartment. I did not move. I just held the camera steady, my finger depressing the shutter. The click, click, click of the camera, the only sound in the wind. I filmed Rex as he passed the envelope to a union foreman, who then waved a forklift forward to load the container marked defective scrap onto a private truck. I had it. The entire criminal conspiracy, right through my lens. Silas had been right. He did not need to interfere. He just needed to let them be seen. An hour later, I met him on that same overpass. The wind was howling, pulling at my jacket. He stood beside me, looking down at the lights of the harbor he controlled. "That you owe me from the restaurant Gitawa he said, his voice nearly lost in the wind. It was not a chain, it was an invitation to see if you were different. I zipped my jacket higher, the cold biting at my neck. "I will repay it," I said, meeting his gaze. "I will repay it with the truth." The next blow came, predictably, from the gossip blog. The Harbor Whisper posted again. This time, it was not a video. It was a series of old photographs from my first year of college. Me and my ex-boyfriend, Chris, at a party, me laughing, him with his arm around me. The headline was, "Silas Caravello's new pet has a history." The article insinuated I was a serial opportunist, attaching myself to powerful men, and that I was probably playing both Silas and my mystery man at the same time. I read it and felt sick. It was a distortion of a memory, a weaponization of my past. I threw my phone onto my bed and refused to look at it. I waited for the call from Silas, the questions, the suspicion. It did not come. Instead, my phone buzzed with a single text message. One sentence. "I trust you." That night, the phone call was different. It was not about logistics or shell companies. It was 3 a.m. I could not sleep. I called him, and he answered on the first ring. "You are awake," I whispered. "I am," he said. I could hear the city sounds in the background. He was on a balcony. "Why did you text me that?" I asked. "You do not know me. You have no reason to trust me." "I saw the way you protected your computer at the college," he said, and my blood ran cold. "I have been watching you longer than you think. Lena, but I stopped when we made our deal. I saw you stand up to the agents. I saw you handle Rex's men, and I saw the photos. The person in them is not the person I am talking to." I believed him. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. "That debt," I said, my voice quiet. "The one that blog thinks I am running from, it is real. My family broke apart because of student loans. My father left because he could not handle the pressure of the collection calls. That is why I am doing this. 3 jobs, the articles. I am trying to dig my way out of a hole my parents fell into." There was a long silence on the line. Then he spoke, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. "My mother was a seamstress, an immigrant in Rookfield County. She worked for a bridal shop, doing the most intricate beadwork. I used to watch her." He paused, and I could hear him take a breath. "She used to say that in her work. If you drop a single stitch, if you make one mistake, you cannot just tie it off. You have to pull out the entire seam. You have to undo hours of work just to fix one tiny error. She said that was what life was like for people like us. One dropped stitch, and our whole life unravels. While the people we work for, they just buy a new dress." I closed my eyes, pressing the phone harder to my ear. I understood. We were the same. We were both just trying to keep the seam from unraveling. We stayed on the line for a long time after that, not speaking. It was not an awkward silence. It was a shared one. It was the sound of 2 people, alone in the dark, finally being seen. Neither of us wanted to be the first to say goodbye. That comfortable, warm quiet, stretching over the phone lines in the dark, felt like the first real commitment we had made. The rain over the harbor was a cold, metallic sheet. Pier 9 was a graveyard of shipping containers, stacked like mismatched coffins under the sickly orange glare of sodium lights. This was not the Red Ember Lounge. This was the city's industrial skeleton. Gianni was silent beside me, a shadow who seemed to absorb the dim light. Silas was not here. Not yet. This was my operation, my contribution to the alliance. "The unit manager's name is Kowalczyk," I whispered, my voice sounding too loud in the damp air. He said his brother-in-law was forced out of the Longshoremen's Union by Harbor Line. He said Rex is using Unit 41C for special holding. Kowalczyk is now on a bus to Milwaukee with his family, Gianni said, his voice a low rumble. Paid for by Valorum. He left us the gate code, 198804. Let's go. Gianni was not subtle, but he was quiet. He handled the keypad, and the heavy iron gate slid open with a well-oiled whisper. The storage facility was a long, echoing corridor of roll-up metal doors. We found 41C. Gianni did not pick the lock. He entered the code, and the door rattled up, revealing a space packed to the ceiling with wooden crates. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and styrofoam. The crates were all stenciled Solar West Imports, defective. Solar panels, I said, pulling the small crowbar from my backpack. That is what they want the manifest to show. Gianni grunted. He wedged the crowbar into a seam and ripped the lid off a crate. I aimed my flashlight inside. It was not glass and silicon. It was a dense stack of server hardware, sleek, black, and identical. These are not defective panels, I breathed, running my hand over the cold metal. They are servers, high-end modified firmware. I recognize the port configuration from a tech journalism class. They are running them through as scrap, but they are selling them as untraceable hardware. This is how they wash the money. As I was piecing it together, a new sound cut through the rain, a heavy diesel truck, braking hard outside, doors slammed. They are early, Gianni said. He did not sound surprised. He sounded annoyed. He pulled me back, behind a stack of crates, as the corridor lit up. Rex's voice echoed off the metal walls. Get the pallets ready. I want this stuff loaded and gone in 10 minutes. 4 men, Harbor Line crew, fanned out, their heavy boots clanging on the concrete. They were coming right toward us. Gianni put a hand on my shoulder, ready to move. Suddenly, the world exploded in noise. A deafening fire alarm began to blare. A second later, the whoosh of the sprinkler system kicked in, and the corridor was instantly drenched in a freezing, high-pressure downpour. The Harbor Line men shouted in confusion, shielding their eyes. I looked down the hall. At the far end, soaked to the bone and illuminated by the flashing red alarm light, stood Silas. His hand was still on the fire alarm pull station. He looked calm, his suit plastered to his body, his eyes fixed on the electronics. Criminals hate moisture, he called out, his voice cutting through the din. It was chaos. Rex's crew panicked, trying to cover the exposed servers. The hardware, Rex bellowed. Get the tarps, you idiots! In that moment of pure distraction, I moved. I slipped the small, coin-sized AirTag from my pocket and jammed it deep into the plastic seam of the crate nearest the door. It was secure. I pulled back, my heart hammering. Then I raised my camera. Rex spotted the movement. He saw the lens. You, he roared, his face contorting with rage. He shoved one of his own men aside and charged, ignoring the water, ignoring Silas. He was coming for me. He was fast, closing the distance in 3 long strides. He was reaching for my throat. Silas was faster. He moved from the shadows like a phantom, stepping directly between us. He did not brace for the impact. He just moved. He put his body in front of mine, shielding me completely. I am here, he said, and the words were not for me. They were a cold promise to Rex. Rex threw a wild, heavy punch. Silas did not try to block it. He simply moved his head, letting the fist graze his shoulder, and grabbed Rex's wrist. He used Rex's own forward momentum, twisted his arm into a brutal lock, and spun, slamming Rex face first into the corrugated metal wall. Rex hit it with a sickening thud and slid to the wet floor, gasping. 2 other men, seeing their boss down, charged as one. Gianni met them, and he did not bother with technique, and he was a brick wall. He moved into the first man with a shoulder check that lifted him off his feet. The second man pulled a box cutter. Gianni intercepted his wrist with one hand and delivered a single, hard, open-palmed strike to his collarbone. The man collapsed. The fight finished. It was brutal, efficient, and over in less than 5 seconds. My hands were shaking, but I held the camera steady. The fake MTCA agent, The one who had threatened me in my apartment was there, trying to haul Rex to his feet. The alarm light flashed red across his panicked face. Click. I had him? Police! The shout was sudden. The corridor was flooded with blue and red light. Cops, too many, too fast. They were here in 7 minutes, Gianni murmured, his voice tight with suspicion. Impossible. They were already rolling. A lieutenant stepped forward, his uniform impeccable, his eyes scanning the scene. He saw the drenched hardware, the subdued harbor line crew, and then he saw Silas. His face broke into a disturbingly familiar smile. Silas and Nun, he said, like they were old friends meeting for a beer. What a mess! Did you find this? Or did you make it? Silas's expression was ice. He did not return the smile. He just stared at the cop, water dripping from his hair onto his face. Lieutenant. His voice was flat. You are a long way from your precinct. We follow the tips. You know that, the cop said, his tone overly friendly. He held out a hand. Silas ignored it. He did not shake his hand. He did not acknowledge the familiarity. He just turned, put a firm hand on the small of my back, and steered me toward the exit. We are done here. We were in the back of his sedan, the rain drumming on the roof, the city lights a blur. The adrenaline had evaporated, leaving behind a deep, rattling chill. I could not stop shaking. My teeth were chattering, partly from the cold, partly from the shock. Silas watched me for a moment, then, without a word, he shrugged off his heavy suit jacket. It was soaked, but it was thick wool. He did not just throw it at me, he held it out, an offering. I looked at his outstretched hand, then at his face. My entire body was trembling. I gave a small, jerky nod. He leaned across the seat and draped the jacket over my shoulders. The warmth from his body was trapped in the lining, and it was immediate. I was enveloped in it. The scent of him clean, expensive wool, and something metallic, like the rain itself, surrounded me. I pulled it tight, my fingers clutching the lapels. Thank you, I whispered. He was quiet for a long moment, watching the rain lash the windows. The wine spill, he said, his voice quiet, was cleaner. I looked at him, completely baffled. He turned his head, and the corner of his mouth lifted in that ghost of a smile. That debt you owe me. It is becoming an honor debt now, much more complicated to collect. A sound escaped my throat, half laugh, half sob. It was relief, pure and hysterical. What are you going to do? I asked, my voice shaking. Demand a cavity search at the police station to make sure I am not hiding any more evidence. The car, which had been deathly silent, suddenly changed. In the front seat, Gianni let out a short, sharp bark of laughter, and Silas actually chuckled. It was a low, warm sound that I had never heard before, and it vibrated right through me. The tension that had been stretched so tight it was about to snap, finally broke. The shaking in my hands slowed. I took a shaky breath and pulled out my phone. I opened the location app, the AirTag. A small blue dot was already moving, heading inland, away from the harbor. It is on the move, I said, my voice hardening, the journalist taking over. We watched it in silence. The truck did not go to another pier. It snaked through the city, heading for Greengate, the old industrial neighborhood of abandoned factories. The dot settled on one location, a defunct, block-long printing press. A data haven, Silas said, his eyes on the screen. Under the old workshop, smart, insulated, easy to defend. We go now, Gianni said, his hand on the gear shift. No. Silas's voice was firm. He looked at me, at the camera still clutched in my lap, at the jacket still draped over my shoulders. We do not. Harborline is expecting a hammer. They are expecting a fight. He tapped the camera. We will give them a scalpel. Lena, I want you to build the timeline. I want you to take that photograph and match it to the MTCA database. I want you to write the entire story. He looked back at the glowing blue dot on the screen. We are not just going to hit them. We are going to dismantle them. Using the law, we are going to strike with the truth. The planning meeting had been grueling. 3 hours spent in Silas's penthouse office with his legal team, a data analyst, and Professor Alistair, who had joined via a secure video link. We had mapped out the entire Harbor Line conspiracy, from the fake MTCA agents to the Green Gate printing press. We had a legal strategy and a media strategy. When it was over, everyone filed out, their faces grim with determination. I stayed behind. Silas's office was less an office and more a glass box suspended over the city. 3 walls were floor-to-ceiling windows, and tonight, the relentless rain had turned Arclight Pier into a glittering, abstract sea of silver and cobalt. The city lights bled into the harbor, a billion fractured diamonds. I stood at the glass, his heavy wool jacket, now dry, draped over my shoulders again. I was watching the storm, feeling the rumble of thunder through the soles of my shoes. The silence in the room was deep, broken only by the hiss of the rain against the glass. I heard the soft, near-silent click of a ceramic mug being placed on the marble-topped console behind me. I did not turn. I just watched his reflection in the window. He stood there, about 10 feet away, watching me watch the city. He had removed his tie, and his white shirt was open at the collar. "I had my housekeeper make hot cocoa," he said. His voice was low, stripped of the command it held during the meeting. "She makes it from scratch, with cinnamon." "Thank you," I said, my voice just as quiet. He did not move to bring it to me, and he just waited. Slowly. I turned to face him. The vast, empty space of the office felt charged, all the air sucked out of it. He was on one side of the large Persian rug, and I was on the other. 10 feet of empty space that felt like a canyon. He took a step, then another, his movements deliberate, unhurried. He stopped an arm's length away, the hot mug still in his hand. He was close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough that I had to tilt my head back slightly to meet his gaze. His eyes, so often calm and analytical, were dark, searching. "Lena," he said, and my name was a question. "Can I be closer?" My heart did a slow, painful kick against my ribs. He was not making a move. He was not assuming. He was asking permission. He was giving me the power, just as he had promised in the speakeasy. I could not find my voice. I just nodded, a small, barely perceptible movement. It was enough. He set the mug down on the end table beside us, his eyes never leaving mine. Then, slowly, as if he were approaching a skittish animal, he lifted his hand. He did not grab me. He did not touch my waist or my face. He extended his hand and, with a hesitation that was more intimate than any touch, he brushed the back of his fingers against the back of my hand. The contact was electric, a jolt, slow-burning and intense, shot up my arm. His skin was warm, slightly rough, and the simple, questioning touch was so respectful it made my throat tighten. I did not pull away. Instead, I uncurled my fingers, a silent invitation. His gaze flickered down to our hands, then back to my eyes. Our breathing, which had been separate, began to sink, falling into the same quiet, waiting rhythm. He took that last step. The space between us vanished. He brought his other hand up, cupping my jaw, his thumb tracing the line of my cheekbone. He was still watching me, still asking. Then he leaned in and kissed me. It was not a kiss of demand or of conquest. It was soft, and it was certain. It was a kiss of arrival, a statement that had been building since the night the wine spilled. His lips were firm and warm, and for a moment, the world just stopped. There was no harbor, no rain, no wrecks, no debt. There was only the solid, reassuring pressure of his mouth on mine. He paused, pulling back just half an inch, not to end it, but to look at me. His eyes were dark, his pupils wide. It was a confirmation. "Are you still here with me?" I answered him. A small smile touched my lips, and I slid my hands from his chest up to his neck, my fingers lacing into the hair at his nape. I was the one who closed the distance this time. I was the one who pulled him closer. The kiss changed. The softness was still there, but now it was underpinned by a deep, shuddering current of need. This was the passion I had sensed in him at the gym, the coiled strength he kept under constant control, and now he was letting me see it. His mouth moved over mine, learning, exploring, and I met him with an equal, desperate honesty. His hand, the one that had been at my jaw, slid down my neck, over my shoulder, and settled firmly in the small of my back. It was a gesture of possession, of support. It was not low. It was not disrespectful. It was an anchor. I pressed myself closer, standing on my toes, wrapping my arms tighter around his neck. I rested my cheek against his jaw, his skin slightly rough with the day's shadow. I could feel his pulse hammering beneath my skin, a frantic, rapid beat that matched my own. He just held me, his arm a steel band around my back, his other hand gripping my shoulder, as if he were afraid I might dissolve. We just breathed, our bodies pressed together, learning the shape and feel of each other. With a low sound, he guided us backward, his movements sure, never breaking the contact. We stumbled against the large leather sofa by the window, sinking into the cushions. We were still fully clothed, a tangle of limbs and his heavy wool jacket. He broke the kiss, but only to press his lips to my temple, my cheekbone, my jaw. His breathing ragged, he whispered against my skin, and the words were not about the past. They were not apologies or explanations. They were about the future. "We are going to do this the right way," he murmured, his voice thick. "Not like this. Not in the middle of a war. Not when you are running on adrenaline and fear." He was not taking, he was promising. I pulled back just enough to see his face. I rested my forehead against his. Our eyes closed. I was smiling, a shaky, breathless smile. The tension, the fear, the exhaustion of the last few weeks, all of it was draining away, replaced by this overwhelming, terrifying certainty. He reached for the thin cashmere blanket folded on the arm of the sofa and pulled it over me. It was not a seduction. It was an act of care. He was drawing a line for both of us. He was showing me, again, that my boundaries were his priority. The passion was there, thrumming between us, a tangible thing, but the respect was stronger. He was proving he was not the monster the city thought he was. We stayed like that for a long time, tangled on the sofa, the rain hissing against the glass, our breathing the only sound in the room. His hand stroked my hair, a slow, calming motion. When we finally separated, pulling apart by inches, the air in the room had changed. The desperate, electric tension was gone. In its place was something solid, a new foundation. This was not a guilty secret. It was not a moment of weakness. It was an anchor. It was the point from which we would now move forward. I sat up, pulling his jacket tighter around me, and he sat beside me, his arm resting on the back of the sofa, not touching me, but close. The spell was broken by the sharp, intrusive buzz of a phone. Silas did not check it. He just closed his eyes, a small flicker of annoyance crossing his face. The phone buzzed again, insistent. He sighed and pulled his phone from his pocket. His gaze scanned the screen, and in an instant, the man beside me, the man who had just kissed me with such restrained tenderness, vanished. The leader returned. His eyes were sharp, cold, and focused. His jaw was set. "What is it?" I asked, already knowing. He looked at me, his gaze shifting, pulling me with him into that new, hard focus. The warmth was gone, replaced by the readiness for a fight. "Gianni," he said, his voice flat. "Rex is moving the hardware. Tonight." He held the phone up so I could see the text. "Greengate. He's trying to get it out of the city before our story hits." We stood up, a single, unified motion. The moment of peace was over. The war was here. We did not have time for the warmth to fade. The kiss was still on my lips when the plan was already in motion. We moved from the sofa to the elevator, a silent, focused team. The tenderness was packed away, replaced by the cold, sharp adrenaline of the fight. We called it Operation Paper Trail. It was not a raid, it was a surgical insertion. At 9 p.m., I walked up to the chained gate of the Green Gate printing press. I was not Lena the waitress. I was Lena Marlowe, unpaid intern for the newly invented Bureau of Urban Security and Trade, BUST. I had a fake laminated ID, a clipboard, and a bright yellow hard hat. I rattled the chain. A single, bored-looking harbor line guard emerged from the shack. "We are closed," he grunted. "I have an emergency inspection summons," I said, my voice high and reedy, the perfect pitch of petty bureaucracy. "We received an anonymous tip about code violations, unsafe electricals, fire hazards. We are here to conduct a preliminary safety check." "A what?" "A safety check," I repeated, tapping my clipboard. "We can either do this now, or I can come back in an hour with a city marshal and a stop work order. Your choice." As I spoke, a black van pulled up, not Silas's sedan, but an anonymous commercial vehicle. The side read, "Valorum Electrical Engineering." Gianni stepped out, also in a hard hat, followed by two other men in matching blue coveralls, carrying heavy toolboxes. On the other side of the city, Silas's lead attorney was filing a civil demand against the property's shell corporation, citing imminent electrical danger, giving us the legal right to be on the premises. We were not criminals breaking in. We were concerned citizens. The guard, faced with paperwork he did not understand and the threat of a city shutdown, grumbled and unlocked the gate. "Fine, but be quick. We're in the middle of a move." "We just need to check the main breakers," Gianni said, his voice a perfect imitation of a bored foreman. They let us in. The main floor was a vast cavern of iron, smelling of mold, damp paper, and old ink. Massive, defunct printing presses stood like sleeping dinosaurs. Rows of lead type were scattered across the floor. Gianni and his men went right, heading for the main power conduit, making loud, official noises about code violations. I went left, toward the old administrative offices. "Looking for the fire safety plans," I called out. The guard just waved me on, eager to get rid of us. I found the dark room exactly where the blueprints Silas had acquired said it would be. It was a reinforced, climate-controlled office, the one place that was not covered in dust. Inside, the servers hummed, a bank of stolen power and stolen data. I did not have much time. I pulled the high-capacity backup drive from my pocket and found the main server's service port. I plugged it in. My journalism class coding kicked in. I was not a hacker, but I knew my way around a directory. I found the ledger. It was all there. Encrypted transactions, dates, shipping manifests, and a recurring payout, coded compliance, to a private account, the account holder, Councilman Davies, the man who had harassed me at the restaurant. A progress bar appeared on my small screen, downloading, 6 minutes remaining. It was too long. As the progress bar hit 40%, the world went black. Not just the lights, the hum of the servers died, the air conditioning unit clicked off. Rex had arrived, and the first thing he did was cut the main power, plunging the entire building into absolute, suffocating darkness. My heart stopped. I was blind, trapped in a concrete box, my only connection to the data a cable in my hand. Then, a new sound, a low, deep thrum from the loading dock. A moment later, a bank of harsh, yellow emergency lights flickered on, powered by a backup generator. Silas. He had not just planned for a shutdown, he had planned for a restart. The scene was lit like a stage. I saw Silas himself at the generator, his face cast in stark yellow shadow. Gianni and the Valorum team were fanned out, no longer engineers, but a solid wall of defense. They were between me and the loading dock, where Rex and 6 of his men were silhouetted against the open bay door. "What the hell is this?" Rex roared, seeing his operation illuminated. "Who are you?" "We are the inspectors," Silas said, his voice calm, echoing in the cavernous room. He stepped forward into the light. "And this facility is in serious violation." "Get them!" Rex screamed. It was not a gunfight. It was a brawl. Gianni and his 2 men met the Harbor Line crew head-on. It was swift, brutal, and kinetic. "Lena, now," Silas yelled. I ripped the drive from the port. The download was incomplete, but I had the ledger. I had Davies. I ran from the office, hard hat flying off, and sprinted for the side exit, the one we had marked. Silas was moving to intercept me, to cover my retreat. I was running, my boots slipping on the scattered metal type. "Silas." I hit a patch of loose lead letters and my ankle twisted. I went down hard, my knee slamming into the concrete. The hard drive flew from my grasp, skittering across the floor and stopping near the legs of an ancient typesetting machine. The side exit was open. Johnny was there, holding it, waving me on. "Boss Lena, go." Silas was at the door, halfway to safety. He saw me fall. He saw the drive. He saw Rex, free from the brawl, pushing past his own men and running straight for me. Silas did not hesitate. He did not yell for me to get up. He did not save himself. He abandoned the exit and ran back, doubling back into the heart of the fight, back to me. He reached me in 2 strides. He did not slow down to help me up. He scooped me up with one arm, his grip like a steel band around my ribs, hauling me to my feet. With his other hand, he snatched the hard drive from the floor. He held it with the same desperate, protective grip he held me. He was holding it like it was a human heart. "Move," he yelled, pushing me toward the exit. We were almost there when a deafening clang echoed through the press. A heavy, metal-clad fire door slid shut, cutting us off from Gianni, cutting us off from the exit, a trap. Rex must have triggered it. We were sealed in. "Silas!" I yelled, slamming my shoulder against the solid steel. "It is no good," he said, his voice rough. He was already scanning the wall, the machinery. "He has us." "No, he does not." I panted. I dropped my clipboard and ripped open the canvas inspector bag I had been carrying. I pulled out a pair of heavy-duty 24-inch bolt cutters. "The plan B. You said he would try to separate us." Silas looked at the cutters, then at me, and a look of pure, primal pride flashed in his eyes. He spotted it first. A heavy steel beam, part of the old press, was held in place by a thick steel retaining band, locking it against the wall. On the other side of that beam was a ventilation shaft. "The band, Lena, cut it!" I clamped the jaws of the cutter onto the thick steel. It was built to hold. "I cannot get the leverage," I gasped, straining against it. "Hold it steady," he commanded. He put his hands under the massive, rust-covered iron beam. "Now, Lena." I bore down with all my weight. Silas let out a raw, inhuman groan, his muscles straining against the impossible weight, lifting the beam just an inch, just enough to release the tension on the band. The bolt cutters snapped through the steel. The beam groaned, and Silas roared as he shoved it, pivoting it away from the wall, revealing a dark, square hole. "Go, go." I scrambled through, into the dusty shaft, and he followed, tumbling out after me just as Rex and his men rounded the corner. We were in a maintenance corridor. We ran. We burst out of a side door into the rainy courtyard, gasping for air. Just as we cleared the building, a motorcycle skidded to a stop in front of us. The driver flipped up his visor. It was Ben, my friend from the journalism seminar. "You are late, Marlowe," he yelled over the engine. "The data," I screamed. I threw him the hard drive. He caught it, gave me a sharp salute, and stuffed it into his waterproof messenger bag. "I see them," a voice shouted from the loading dock. Harbor Line men were spilling out into the yard. Ben just smiled, revved his engine, and fishtailed out of the gate, the data secure and already on its way to Professor Alistair. Rex's men saw him, saw his helmet camera, and stopped, hesitant to act in front of a journalist. That was when the real sirens came, from the other direction, not city police. 4 dark blue sedans, sirens screaming, marked with the gold seal of the MTCA, the real MTCA. They flooded the courtyard, tactical, organized, the fake agents, the ones who had come with Rex, looked at the real agents in total confusion. A woman in a sharp federal uniform stepped out and confronted the fake agent, the one from my apartment. "MTCA, identify yourself." He flashed his fake badge. She did not even blink. "That badge is a 2019 issue," she said, her voice like ice. "That font was discontinued 4 years ago." She nodded to her men. "Cuff them, all of them, impersonating a federal officer." Silas's anonymous tip, complete with my photo and the PDF of the compliance manual, had landed. Rex saw it. He saw his men being arrested by the very agency he was impersonating. He saw his hardware being seized. He saw me, standing next to Silas, breathing hard, but standing. He did not fight. He did not run. He just backed away, into the shadows of the alley, his eyes burning with a hatred that was absolute. He vanished. Gianni appeared at my side, his knuckles bloody. "Boss, he is gone." Silas did not even look. He was already on his phone, not to the police, but to his lawyer. "He's gone. It does not matter." He turned to me, the yellow emergency light catching the rain on his face. "Freeze their accounts," he said into the phone, his voice pure steel. "All of them. We have the ledger. We have the councilman. We strike the wallet." My name was on the front page of the Baltimore Ledger, printed in bold, uncompromising ink. The article was a bomb. It detonated over the city at 6 a.m., and the shockwaves spread instantly. I did not just tell the story of the Harbor Line Pact. I laid out the entire blueprint of their corruption. I published the photo of the fake MTCA agent. I published the partial ledger connecting Councilman Davies to the Greengate servers. I connected the dots between the defective solar panels, the laundered money, and the extortionate security fees being forced on the residents of Prospect Key, and I signed my name, Lena Marlowe. It was the most dangerous and the most honest thing I had ever done. By putting my name on the story, I became a shield. My anonymous sources, Kowalczyk, the waitresses I had interviewed for my tip theft story, the terrified tenants in my building were all safe. I had become the single public target. The fallout was immediate. Councilman Davies was ambushed by reporters on the steps of City Hall, his face a mask of sputtering rage as he denied everything. The Interstate Integrity Commission, the IIC, facing a public relations nightmare, announced a full-scale investigation into the neighborhood security fee budget, effectively freezing the program. The real MTCA, humiliated by the badge scandal, was forced to announce an internal reform and a task force to combat agency impersonation. The city was in an uproar, and I was at the center of it. That evening, a special town hall was convened in the Prospect Key Community Center. It was standing room only, the air thick with anger, fear, and a new, fragile kind of hope. I was at the front, sitting at a folding table, facing my neighbors. When I looked up, I saw him. Silas Caravello entered from the back, just as the meeting was called to order. He was not dressed for a meeting of this kind. He wore a quiet, perfectly cut suit of charcoal gray, a ghost in the fluorescent lighting. He did not come to the front. He did not speak to anyone. He simply took a seat in the last row, a silent observer, his hands folded in his lap. He was just a man in a gray suit, watching. For 2 hours, I was questioned, not just by the moderator, but by the people. They were angry and they were scared. "They will just come back," one woman cried. "You wrote a story. What good is a story when they break our windows?" "What about Davies?" another man shouted. "He will get away with it." I answered every question. I did not make promises I could not keep. I laid out the facts. I explained the legal process. I spoke calmly, my voice amplified by the cheap microphone. Every time I finished an answer, my eyes found his. He was not smiling, he was not reacting, but each time, he would give a single, slow nod. "You are doing fine. Keep going." It was all the strength I needed. At the end, my landlord, Henderson, stood up, his face slick with sweat. "You have ruined this neighborhood, Marlowe. You have brought criminals to our doorstep." Before anyone could react, Maria's mother stood up. "No, she is the first person who ever fought for us, the only one." The room erupted. The applause was not polite. It was a roar. It was the sound of people who had been silent for too long. I held up my hand, my throat tight. This story, I said, my voice thick. It is not just mine. It belongs to this neighborhood. I looked at the check I had received from the newspaper. It was not much, but it was more money than I'd ever seen in one place. I am pledging 50% of my royalties from this article, and any that follow, to a new legal aid fund. For any service worker or tenant in Prospect Key who is facing illegal pressure. The room exploded again. People were on their feet, clapping, crying, and in the back row, Silas Caravello stood, his hands at his sides, just watching me. I got home at 11 p.m. Anchor, my pit bull, met me at the door, his tail thumping. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving me feeling hollowed out, exhausted. I locked the deadbolt, leaned against the door, and just closed my eyes. The crash was so loud it felt like an explosion. Glass shattered everywhere. Anchor barked, a deep, terrified sound. A large rock, wrapped in a piece of paper, skidded across my kitchen floor. I screamed. The rock had come straight through my living room window, leaving a gaping, jagged hole. The wind was already whistling through it. I scrambled for my phone, my hands shaking so violently I could barely dial. Before I could, there was a pounding on my door. "Lena, open the door. It is me, Gianni." I ripped the chain off and opened it. Gianni was there, his gun drawn, his eyes sweeping my apartment. Behind him was Silas. Silas did not check the room. He walked straight to me, his eyes taking in my shaking hands, the glittering sea of glass. He did not say, "Are you okay?" He did not say, "I told you this would happen." He just looked at the hole, then at me. "Pack a bag," he said, his voice hard. "You are not staying here." "No," I said, my voice trembling. "No, if I run, they win. This is my home. This is what I was fighting for." He stared at me for a long moment, the wind whipping my hair around my face. I expected him to argue, to command, to drag me out. Instead, he nodded. "Gianni, get the plywood from the truck and the toolkit and call for a 24-hour glass replacement." He looked at me. "Anchor, put him in the bathroom so he does not cut his feet. I will clean this up." He did not move me to his fortress penthouse. He did not hide me in a safe house. He brought the safety to me. For an hour, Silas Caravello, the head of the Valorum Circle, was on his hands and knees in my tiny apartment, sweeping up broken glass. Gianni boarded up the window, sealing the room. Then, Silas installed 2 high-resolution, motion-activated cameras, one pointing at my door, one at the street. When he was done, the apartment was secure. It was almost 3 a.m. "I will be outside," he said. "What?" I followed him to the door. You cannot just sit in my hallway." "I can," he said. He looked at Gianni. "Go home. I have this." Gianni looked like he wanted to argue, but he just nodded and left. Silas sat down on the floor of the public hallway, his back against the wall opposite my door, his gray suit jacket unbuttoned. He looked like a king holding court in a dungeon. "This is insane," I whispered. "You cannot sleep here." "I will not be sleeping," he said simply. "Go to sleep, Lena. You are safe." I went inside. I locked the door. I stared at the wood. I could feel him on the other side. I could not sleep knowing he was out there on the hard, cold floor. I opened the door. He looked up, his expression unreadable. "I cannot," I said, "but I have cup noodles and a kettle." 5 minutes later, we were sitting side by side on the top step of the concrete stairwell, sharing a plastic-wrapped styrofoam cup of instant ramen. The hallway was lit by a single, flickering fluorescent bulb. It was the least romantic, most intimate meal of my life. We ate in silence for a few minutes. I was hyper-aware of his shoulder, inches from mine. I set my plastic fork down and put my hand on his knee. The wool of his suit was fine, but beneath it, his leg was rock solid. He stopped eating, his hand frozen halfway to his mouth. "You are not responsible for me, Silas," I said quietly, my voice echoing in the stairwell. "This is not your debt to pay. This is not your mess to clean up." He looked at my hand on his knee. "I know." "We are a pair," I said, the words feeling right, solid. "You do not guard me. We protect each other. I am not your ward. I am your ally." He set his noodles down and covered my hand with his. His palm was warm and calloused, a working man's hand hidden by his manicured image. "The first time," he said, his voice low, "the first time anyone ever really trusted me. I was 19. I was working the docks, the real docks, not the offices. I was running with a bad crew." He stared at the peeling paint on the opposite wall, but I knew he was seeing something else. I found a wallet. It had $900 in it, rent for a whole family. I knew the guy who dropped it. He was a shift foreman, a good man. My crew. They told me to keep it, that it was a gift, that the foreman was an idiot for losing it. He tightened his grip on my hand. I gave it back. Every dollar. The next day, the foreman, Mr. Rourke, he found me. He did not thank me. He just offered me a job, running his ledger, his real ledger. He said, "I know who you run with, but I do not believe that is who you are." He did not. He did not make me apologize for the company I kept. He just trusted me to be better. He looked at me, his eyes clear and intense. That feeling, being forgiven without ever having to ask for it, it saved my life. It stopped me from a long fall. He looked at my hand on his knee. "That is what you are doing, Lena. You are not asking me to be anything other than what I am, but you are trusting me to be better. That is a dangerous thing to give me." "I am not giving it," I said, turning my hand over to lace my fingers with his. "You are earning it." A sound made us both look up. Lieutenant Price, the friendly cop from the warehouse, was at the bottom of the stairs. His face was a mask of professional concern. "Marlowe, Mr. Caravello," he said, his voice oily. "What a terrible thing. I heard the call. Came right over. Vandalism. We will find who did this." "Thank you, Lieutenant," I said, not moving from the step. "Of course. Just need to ask you a few questions." He started to climb the stairs, his eyes on Silas. "Silas, good to see you taking such a personal interest in our local journalists." Silas just stared at him, his expression flat. "Lieutenant," I said, my voice sharp. He stopped, his foot on the third step. "Since you are here, I was just reviewing my notes for a follow-up story on the Green Gate raid. My sources say the patrol cars in your precinct were logged as on scene 7 minutes before the first 911 call was even made." Price's smile did not just fade, it vanished. His face went pale. That is a clerical error. Dispatch logs are complex." "I am sure they are," I said, my voice sweet as poison. "I filed a formal request for those logs this afternoon. Along with your unit's internal disciplinary files, I am very interested in clerical errors." He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. Not as a waitress, not as Silas's girl, but as a threat. He backed down the stairs. I will let you get some rest. My sergeant will follow up." He turned and left, walking just a little too fast. I looked at Silas. He was watching me with an expression of profound, undisguised admiration. Far across the street, Makrat-Wassyi, from the rooftop of a derelict building, a red light blinked. Rex lowered the camera, a telephoto lens capturing the entire scene, the cop, the girl, and the mafia boss, sitting on the stairs like a couple. He smiled. He had it, the perfect leverage. He knew exactly where to use it. The annual Port Authority fundraising gala, the perfect wedding of politics and crime. And he had just found the party favors. The Arclight Maritime Museum was a cathedral of glass and steel, built to honor the harbor's history. Tonight, it was a stage for its corrupt future. The Port Authority fundraising gala was the crown jewel of the city's social calendar, a place where politicians, old money, and shadow operators like Silas mingled so seamlessly you could not tell one from the other. I stood by his side, a long way from the Red Ember Lounge. I was in a simple, severe black dress with a square neckline. It was elegant, but its real purpose was to perfectly conceal the high-fidelity microphone clipped to its lining. My friend Ben was parked in a broadcast van 2 blocks away, listening to every word. Silas was a different man tonight. He was not the mafia boss, he was Mr. Caravello, the legitimate logistics magnate. He was charisma and civilization, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back, guiding me through the crowd. He was the picture of a patient benefactor. Rex was here, too, when he was not skulking in the shadows. He was front and center, wearing a new suit, smiling, shaking hands with Councilman Davies. He was orchestrating his final move, a generous cash donation to the Port Authority, collected in a sleek aluminum briefcase, which he intended to have an associate accidentally swap with Silas's. He was manufacturing a bribery scene, and he had tipped off Lieutenant Price to be ready. The orchestra began a slow, languid waltz. Silas turned to me. "May I have this dance, Miss Marlowe?" He led me to the floor. The lights were low, the music a soft hum. He pulled me close, his hand firm on my back, our bodies moving as one. This was not the gym. This was not the stairwell. This was a public declaration. "Rex's man is at the 5 o'clock position, by the bar," Silas murmured, his lips brushing my ear, his voice masked by the music. "He's holding the briefcase." "Price is at the 9 o'clock, by the main exit," I whispered back, my hand on his shoulder. "He's trying not to look at us, but he is. Davies is making his way to the podium. He's about to announce the donation drive." "When the music swells," Silas said, "Rex will move. He will signal his man to intercept me as I walk back to our table. The handoff will take 1 second. Price will move in 2. "Your legal team?" I asked. "In place. The district attorney's investigators are with them. In the lobby. Ben is ready." "Ready," I confirmed. We spun. A slow, graceful turn, our eyes locked. We were not just dancing, we were timing the final beats of the trap. As Silas predicted, Councilman Davies took the podium, and now we opened the floor to our generous patrons. The music swelled, the dance ended. We applauded. Silas kissed my hand and began to walk me back to our table, his path set to intersect directly with Rex's man. Rex nodded. The man with the briefcase moved. It all happened at once. The man stepped in front of Silas. "Mr. Caravello, a moment." He held up the case. "Exactly," a new, loud voice cut through the room. The first surprise, Silas's legal team, backed by 2 plainclothes investigators from the DA's office, stepped forward, not toward Silas, but toward the man with the briefcase. "Sir," the lawyer said, holding up a civil warrant, "we are serving this subpoena for all financial records related to the Greengate property. We will be taking that briefcase as evidence." Rex's face went white. This was not the plan. Lieutenant Price, seeing his operation collapsing, moved anyway. He strode forward, his hand on his service weapon. "What is going on here, Caravello? I am getting reports of a bribery in progress. I am going to have to ask you to—" "Stand down, Lieutenant." The second surprise, a woman in a severe business suit, flanked by 2 armed men in IIC windbreakers, stepped in front of Price, blocking his path. It was the same team that had investigated the security fees. "You're interfering in a multi-agency investigation. Lieutenant Price," she said, her voice like ice, "your jurisdiction does not apply here. Step away, or you will be detained for obstruction." Price froze, his hand hovering over his gun, his face a mask of confusion and rage. He was trapped. Rex saw it. He saw his plan in ashes. He saw the DA, the IIC, and Silas, all moving in perfect lethal sync. He panicked. He ran to the nearest wall and pulled the fire alarm, the sprinkler system. Again. A deluge of high-pressure water erupted from the ceiling. The crowd screamed. Chaos. In the flashing strobes of the alarm, Rex did not run for the exit. He ran for me. He knew I was the journalist. He knew that I was the voice. He grabbed my arm in a brutal grip. "You want a story," he snarled, dragging me through the panicked crowd. "You will be the story." He was pulling me toward the backstage area, intending to use me as a human shield, a media hostage. As he hauled me through a curtain, my microphone, still live, scraped against the fabric, emitting a loud burst of static over the museum's speakers. Rex froze. He looked at the clip on my dress. He knew. In a secure room, Silas watched this on a monitor, his fists clenched. He did not charge in. He trusted me. He hit the button on his own transmitter. His voice, calm and steady, filled my hidden earpiece, unheard by Rex. "You are leading. Lena, it is your game." I stopped fighting. I stood tall, the water plastering my hair to my face. I looked Rex dead in the eye, and I spoke, my voice booming over the museum's PA system, cutting through the alarm. "You are trying to use me to stage a scene. Are you not, Rex?" The crowd, huddled by the exits, looked up at the speakers, then at the massive LED screens above the podium. "You think dragging me back here changes anything?" I continued, my voice clear and strong. Rex, blinded by rage, did not notice the screens had changed. Ben was hitting play. "You used fake agents to terrorize tenants," I said, and the video of the two imposters threatening me in my apartment flashed on the screen. "You used shell companies to wash money." The Greengate server ledger appeared, the lines of code highlighting the transfers to Councilman Davies. "You thought you could buy the city and silence anyone who stood in your way." The crowd was no longer panicked. They were watching. A sea of cell phones rose, their lights like a galaxy of stars, every single one recording. Rex lost his mind. "Shut up!" he screamed. He pulled a knife from his jacket, the blade glinting in the alarm light. He grabbed my hair, yanking my head back, and pressed the knife to my throat. I said, "Shut up." A deep, ferocious bark echoed from the side stage. Anchor, my pit bull. Gianni had registered him as an emotional support animal for a guest and had him waiting with a handler in the wings for this exact moment. Rex, surprised by the sound, flinched. His head turned for just a fraction of a second, his grip on my hair loosening, the knife moving 1 inch from my skin. It was more than Gianni needed. He moved from the shadow of a prop ship like smoke, a blur of motion. He did not attack Rex. He attacked the weapon. One hand clamped down on Rex's wrist, the thumb finding the pressure point the other hand moving with precise, brutal speed struck Rex's elbow. A sickening crack, not of bone, but of a joint locking. Rex's hand spasmed open. The knife clattered harmlessly to the stage floor. Gianni did not follow up. He did not hit him. He just stepped back, the threat neutralized, as Rex clutched his useless arm. I stumbled, free, gasping for air. Silas was there. He moved past Gianni, past Rex, and came straight to me. He wrapped one arm around my shoulders, pulling me against his side, a solid wall of support. He did not shield my face. He did not cover my mouth. He did not try to speak for me. I looked out at the sea of phone cameras, at the stunned faces of the city's elite. I stepped forward, Silas's arm still around me, and I spoke into the microphone still clipped to my dress. "My name is Lena Marlowe," I said, my voice shaking but unbreakable, "and I do not need anyone to speak for me." The rain from the sprinklers was still pouring down, mixing with the flashing red of the alarm, but the chaos had frozen. My last words, my real name, hung in the air of the great hall. We were on the wide, soaked marble steps at the entrance, surrounded by the flashing blue and red lights of genuine law enforcement. The ISC agent, the woman who had blocked Price, stepped up to the news cameras that were now flooding the plaza. "The Interstate Integrity Commission," she announced, her voice crisp and official, "is launching a special, nonpartisan investigation into the Port Authority's discretionary funds, pending a full review of the evidence provided by Miss Marlowe." As she spoke, 2 of her agents approached Lieutenant Price, who stood dumbfounded, his authority stripped away. Lieutenant, one said, "You are being detained for accessory to fraud and obstruction of a federal investigation." They pulled his hands behind his back. The sharp metallic click of the handcuffs was the only sound for a moment, loud even over the dying alarm. Nearby, the head of the real MTCA, his face grim, was giving a forced statement to another reporter. The MTCA acknowledges a severe breach of public trust. We will be conducting a full internal reform of our authentication protocols. He was promising change, but his eyes were on me. I saw movement from the corner of my eye, Rex. His arm hung uselessly at his side, his face a mask of pale defeat. He was trying to slip away, to melt into the crowd of shell-shocked donors huddled by the doors. I stepped forward, away from Silas's protective side. My phone, still connected to the PA system, was in my hand. I held it up. "Where are you going, Rex?" My voice boomed across the plaza. He froze. I swiped to the ledger, the one I had ripped from his server. On October 5th, I read, my voice ringing with cold, hard clarity. A transfer of $50,000 to White Wharf Fund Number 5. On October 12th, another $100,000. I looked up from the screen, my eyes locking on him. "That is your shell company, is it not? The one you used to pay the fake MTCA agents, the one you used to launder the extortion fees." I did not need to accuse him. I just needed to read his own lies back to him. I was closing the loop, leaving no exit. He was surrounded, not by guns, but by his own data. Across the plaza, Silas moved. He did not go to Rex. He walked directly to Councilman Davies, who looked like he was about to be physically ill. Davies was trying to hide behind a marble pillar, his face ashen. Silas did not threaten him. He did not touch him. He just stopped 5 feet away. A perfect gentleman. "Councilman," Silas said, his voice quiet but carrying in the sudden silence. Davies flinched. "This is how I protect my people now, Davies," Silas said, "not in the dark, with the light." It was an admission, a profound shift. He was acknowledging a new way of existing, a new kind of power. He was stepping out of the shadows he had lived in his entire life. And he was doing it for me. It seemed over. The villains were caught, the truth exposed. Then, a sharp voice cut through the air. "This is a farce, a fabrication." A man in an expensive suit, someone I did not recognize, pushed through the crowd. Councilman Davies' lawyer. He was holding a small digital audio recorder. "This entire investigation is the result of coercion," the lawyer shouted, playing directly to the cameras. "This woman, Lena Marlowe, is not a journalist. She is a dependent. She is acting under the duress of Silas Caravello, a known criminal operator." He held the recorder up high. "I have proof, a recording of their very first interaction. He trapped her." He pressed play. The sound of a crowded restaurant filled the plaza. My voice, small and terrified. "I am so sorry." And then Silas's voice, smooth and cold. "Now you owe me." A collective gasp went through the crowd. The cameras all swiveled to me. The lawyer was painting the picture Rex had always wanted, the poor waitress trapped by the mafia boss, forced to do his bidding, my credibility, my story, my agency. All of it was about to unravel. The lawyer smiled, a vicious, triumphant look. "He owned her from the beginning. She is his property. None of this is admissible. It is all the fruit of a poisoned tree." I looked at Silas. He was watching me, his face impassive. He was not going to save me. This was my move. I smiled. "You are absolutely right," I said, my voice once again carrying over the speakers. "You should play the whole recording, but you seem to have cut it short." The lawyer's smile faltered. I reached into the small, waterproof bag I'd carried, the one that held my backup batteries and my journalism tools. I pulled out my own recorder, the one I had running that night to protect myself from customers like Councilman Davies. "Let us play the full context," I said. "Professor Alastair taught me to always keep a backup." I pressed play. The crowd heard Silas's voice, "Now you owe me." And then, the rest of the sentence. The part Rex's microphone had not caught. The part that changed everything. An invitation to say no. There was a beat of pure, stunned silence. Then Silas's voice continued. "From my recording, sharp and clear, Careful, councilman. Some stains are impossible to get out, especially the ones that come from opening your mouth at the wrong time. The truth landed like a thunderclap. The crowd did not just gasp, they understood. It was not a threat. It was not a chain. It was the exact opposite. It was a contract of respect. It was consent. The lawyer's face collapsed. He had just proven my case. Public opinion, which had wavered for a single, fatal second, snapped back like a steel cable. It was over. The next morning's Baltimore Ledger headline said it all: the case solved by disciplined kindness. In the weeks that followed, the city began to heal. I took the legal aid fund I had promised and, with a massive donation from an anonymous benefactor who clearly owned a logistics empire, I officially opened the Red Ember Fund. It was a nonprofit dedicated to legal protection for the service and gig economy workers of Baltimore. Silas made his own move. He did not expand his territory. He did not absorb Harborline's routes. Instead, he held a press conference. He announced the Valorum Clinic, a fully funded, state-of-the-art occupational health clinic for all longshoremen and port workers. Open free of charge. It was a social enterprise. It was clean. It was his mother's legacy, a way of mending the seams. 2 months later, the city was quiet. The air was cold, crisp, and clean. I was standing on the roof of my apartment building. Not the penthouse, mine. The wind coming off the harbor was salty and sharp. I heard the door open behind me. Silas. He did not wear his suits when he came here. He wore jeans and a dark wool peacoat. He came to stand beside me, not touching, just sharing the view of the water. I absent-mindedly rubbed my left wrist. A thin, silvery scar, pale in the moonlight, remained where the steel band had snagged me in the Green Gate Press. A reminder. "It healed well," he said quietly. "It did," I said. I looked at him. "I am not leaving Baltimore. My journalism program offered me a full scholarship based on the Harborline investigation." "I know. I read about it." "I am staying," I said, needing him to understand. "I choose to stay. I am not staying because I owe you. I am not staying because of what you did for me or what we did together. I am staying because this is my home." I turned to him fully. "I am not in your debt." He looked at me, and his eyes, usually so guarded, were completely open. "I know," he said, his voice soft, "and I am learning." "Learning what?" "How to stand behind your spotlight," he said. "It is much brighter than the shadows I am used to, but the view is better." He did what he did that night in his office. He held out his hand, palm up, an offering, not a command. I did not just take it. I stepped into him, lacing my fingers through his and wrapping my other arm around his waist. He responded instantly, his arms enfolding me, pulling me tight against the cold wool of his coat. He kissed me. It was not the desperate, questioning kiss from his office. It was not the frantic, adrenaline-fueled embrace of the fight. It was deep, and it was slow, and it was sure. It was a kiss that held the promise of 1,000 quiet mornings, of arguments over headlines, of shared silence. It was the kiss of an equal. I pulled back, breathless, and a laugh escaped me, a real, happy laugh. He smiled against my forehead, and he laughed too, a low, warm sound. From the harbor below, a single, long blast from a cargo ship's horn echoed up through the city, a deep, resonant blessing on the cold night air. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We would love to hear your thoughts, so please comment below and let us know where in the world you are listening from so we can all connect and share. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and like this video. Please support us even more by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by many more people.